I didn't say a phrase once they surpassed me that eviction notice. I simply slid the 1923 water rights deed across the desk and watched 35 McMansions become lakefront assets. The Willowbrook Estates HOA notion they might thieve my grandfather's farm, even as I used to be deployed in Afghanistan. These pompous bureaucrats built their perfect suburban paradise on stolen land, complete with tennis outfit Karens patrolling in golfing carts. What they failed to recognize, I'm a Navy Corps engineer. That little earth dam on my belongings had been ready 45 years for a person silly sufficient to construct downstream. The audacity became definitely something to behold until the spillway gates opened. Then their luxurious development got its first taste of herbal flooding. All this was going to be pleasant. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below due to the fact you are approximately to witness the maximum lovely Hojo Zigdown regarding federal water law and gravity. Let me introduce you to Jake Morrison. It really is me. 34 years old, Navy Corps of Engineers, and the third-generation owner of 47 acres of top Texas land just outdoor Austin. My grandfather, who we all referred to as Pops, sold this property lower back in 1955, whilst Austin changed into nonetheless a sleepy college city, and barbecue joints outnumbered tech agencies by way of about A0 to at least 1. Pops was the kind of guy who believed in looking after the land and the humans on it. In 1978, he constructed a small earth dam on our assets. Nothing fancy, just good engineering designed to accumulate rainwater for the livestock and help out our downstream pals at some stage in dry spells. The Military Corps of Engineers even helped him with the layout. Pops constantly stated that one day the returned 40 acres might be well worth something unique. However, for now, it was just lovely rolling hills in which we ran cattle and I discovered to seek. Then got here my 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I specialized in water management and infrastructure. Turns out building wells and coping with water go with the flow in a war zone teaches you a thing, or approximately how treasured clean water really is and how speedy humans will fight over it. At the same time as I was on my Twitty deployment, Pops surpassed away. The property went into a agree with managed via my properly. That means, however, overwhelmed Sister Sarah, who lives in California, and knows about as a great deal about Texas land law as I recognize approximately browsing. She employed a local belongings control enterprise referred to as Lonar Land Services to deal with the taxes and maintenance. The property taxes got paid mechanically. But here's the thing. Sarah in no way genuinely checked out the tax assessment. Massive mistake. Input our villain, Margaret Maggie Thornwell, 52 years antique, president of Willowbrook Estates HOA, and the type of female who drives a white BMW X7 and treats tennis clothes like enterprise attire. Maggies were given that particular brand of passive competitive sweetness that Southern ladies best around age 45. You know, the kind where they will smile even as they're stabbing you within the lower back and by some means make it sound like they are doing you a choose. Maggie's married to Metropolis Councilman Rick Thornwell, which need to inform you the whole lot you need to know about how she receives things completed. She's got a popularity for neighborhood beautification projects. That is fancy speak for forcing out anybody who does not inshape her vision of suburban perfection. The scent of her high-priced fragrance can't quite mask the stench of cigarette smoke and entitlement that follows her round like a cloud. I came home from deployment in August 2023, equipped to, in the end, spend a few real time on Pop's land. Drove down that acquainted gravel street beyond the antique oak tree wherein I would carved my initials as a child, looking forward to see the identical rolling pastures and that little earth dam sparkling in the Texas solar. Instead, I found creation crews, concrete vans, and survey stakes scattered throughout my returned 40 like some kind of suburban invasion. The crunch of gravel beneath my boots felt distinct by some means, angrier. I could taste the dirt in my own growing fury as I marched as much as the development foreman. "Sorry, pal," he stated, no longer looking sorry in any respect. "We got lets in the entirety. This is Willowbrook Estates property now." I called the police. Officer Martinez showed up and defined with apparent pain that the HOA had filed an unfavorable possession claim, while I used to be distant places. Apparently, while no one's actively the usage of land for a shore length, and if you can show been enhancing it, you can every so often claim ownership. It is an antique law designed to prevent land from sitting empty forever, but it has grown to be a favorite tool of builders in HOA trying to enlarge their empire. That's when Maggie appeared, using up in her little golf cart like some sort of suburban warlord. Her voice had that syrupy sweetness that right now made me want to test my pockets. Your circle of relatives deserted this land, honey, she stated, smiling like she'd become doing me a prefer. We are simply placing it to exact use for the network. But here's what sincerely got my blood boiling. I discovered that her creation crews had diverted the small creek that feeds Pop's dam. The water level was losing every unmarried day, and with it 45 years of cautious water management that had helped our acquaintances through droughts, floods, and the entirety in among. As I stood there watching the water stage drop, Maggie's parting shot echoed in my ears. You need to have stayed closer to domestic, soldier boy. It really is after I knew this wasn't pretty much land. It changed to struggle. I hired the first legal professional I could locate. Massive mistake. This guy quoted me $85,000 simply to project the zoning change. Turns out whilst I used to be serving my U. So, Maggie's husband, Rick, had pushed via an emergency zoning change. Moon family's land went from agricultural pre-validation to residential improvement sector quicker than you can say war of hobby. But right here's wherein my military corps education came in available. While that overpriced legal professional turned into shuffling papers and billing hours, I used to be digging via the county records like I was hunting for wide. And just like in Afghanistan, the devil become in the information. I found Pops' unique 1978 dam production permits, and that they have been lovely. See, Pops did not simply build that dam himself. He worked directly with the Military Corps of Engineers for flood control and watershed control. That intended federal jurisdiction. And right here's your first information nugget. Any dam constructed with federal guidance creates federal jurisdiction that local HOA cannot override duration. The steel taste of adrenaline hit my tongue as I realized what I might observed. This wasn't just a belongings dispute anymore. It changed into a federal case. However weight it gets higher. While I was photocopying permits at the courthouse, I stumbled across a 1923 water rights deed buried within the antique records. My fantastic grandfather had bought senior water rights to the whole Willow Creek wed. These rights were older than the town, older than the county's municipal water system, older than every unmarried one of these McMansions sitting on my land. They weren't just stealing my belongings, they had been stealing my water. Meanwhile, Maggie became busy playing the victim. She prepared an emergency HOA assembly about the dangerous dam structure, whole with a local news team she'd glaringly tipped off earlier. I watched her at the night news, standing in front of her flawlessly manicured lawn, talking approximately kids' protection and community protection. We are just worried about our kids' protection, she stated, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. That dam seems prepared to burst, and we've households living right downstream. The humorous thing about nearby news is they love an excellent story, but they're now not continually extremely good with observe-up research. In the event that they'd stricken to test, they might have found that my dam had exceeded its maximum latest safety inspection with flying hues. But Maggie wasn't executed. She posted at the Round the Corner app, that digital community watch wherein HOA presidents visit flex their petty authority. Her submit warned approximately competitive assets disputes and unstable individuals within the area. She in no way cited my call, but she failed to need to. In a community that small, everybody knew precisely who she changed into speak me about. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with cedar pollen hung heavy within the august air as I stood on my front porch every nighttime looking their production, crews paintings double shifts. They had been racing to complete the one's homes earlier than I should get any kind of criminal injunction. Each night I counted new basis pours. Each nighttime the water level in Pop's Dam dropped any other inch. It truly is after I known as my old Navy pal Tony Riggs, who now works for the EPA Enforcement Department. 20 minutes at the cell phone with Tony taught me extra about environmental regulation than 3 hours with that luxurious attorney. Jake Tony said if they're diverting a herbal waterway without federal lets in, that's a Smooth Water Act violation. And if your dam has federal jurisdiction, he did not want to complete the sentence. I started documenting the entirety. Path cameras across the property perimeter, timestamped pics of each water diversion, flow measurements at 3 distinctive points along the creek. My sister Sarah referred to us from California, begging me to simply take the cash and stroll away. However, this wasn't about cash anymore. It changed into about the crunch of gravel beneath production boots that had no enterprise being on my land. It changed into approximately the sound of Maggie's heels clicking throughout courthouse marble throughout zoning hearings that need to, in no way, have came about. It changed into approximately the sour flavor of courthouse coffee during research classes that revealed simply how deep this corruption went. Maximum of all, it became about that dam. Pops built it to assist the network throughout dry spells. For 45 years, it had been a source of existence for our neighbors downstream. Maggie's group changed into turning it right into an ornamental pond for McMansions. Right here's the component about water rights in Texas. They may be older than oil rights, older than mineral rights, and a hell of lots harder to steal. However, you need to recognize the way to fight for them. As I stood there looking some other concrete truck rumble beyond my kitchen window, I realized something vital. This wasn't going to be won in a court with costly attorneys and felony briefs. This changed into going to be won with engineering. Maggie decided to turn up the heat. She prepared what she known as a community safety patrol. 3 HOA board members in matching polo shirts who parked at my assets front like some sort of suburban checkpoint. They photographed each traveler, wrote down license plates, and filed reports with the sheriff approximately suspicious hobby. The harassment marketing campaign became textbook intimidation. Loud music complaints once I ran my radio for the duration of farm work. Unsightly structures. Citations for my flawlessly practical farmhouse that have been status seeing that 1962. Environmental hazards. Reviews about my septic machine that had passed inspection just 6 months earlier. However, the real kick inside the enamel came whilst Rick used his Metropolis Council function to order a wellness test on me via veteran offerings. Reputedly, I was a bothered veteran who might be struggling with readjustment troubles. The social worker who showed up became apologetic, however thorough. She had to check bins on her clipboard at the same time as Maggie watched from her golf cart, like she turned into supervising a Navy inspection. It's whilst the coordinated bureaucratic attack started out. Building inspector, fire marshal, fitness branch, and animal manipulate all showed up at the identical day like some type of regulatory SWAT team. Each one determined minor violations requiring high-priced corrections. The building inspector, who occurred to be a drinking pal of Rick's, declared that my front porch needed $8,000 in foundation paintings. I identified the squeeze play at once. It is the same tactic they use in battle zones to strain neighborhood officers, overwhelm them with bureaucracy until they surrender and cooperate, but can play that recreation. Whilst they were drowning me in office work, I used to be making a few cell phone calls of my own. Tony Riggs at the EPA became very involved to examine that Maggie's HOA had by no means filed the desired wetlands assessment earlier than redirecting Willow Creek. Seems any development that redirects natural waterways requires federal environmental clearance, even on non-public property. And the fines for violations start at $50,000 in keeping with day. The odor of fresh concrete curing in the summer season heat reminded me every morning that I used to be strolling out of time. But my research changed into paying off in methods Maggie in no way expected. I discovered that their whole improvement had been constructed in what the Navy Corps classified as a 100-year floodplain. Coverage corporations had to start with refused insurance until the HOA supplied the flood mitigation plan. Their solution: permanently divert Willow Creek far away from the brand new houses and allow it flood my belongings as an alternative. Right, here's your second information nugget. Coverage fraud in development projects frequently contains crook consequences, no longer simply civil ones. Whilst developers lie approximately flood risks to get insurance, this is federal mail fraud. The deeper I dug, the more I found out this wasn't Maggie's first rodeo. Her preceding HOA in Houston had paid a $2.03 million EPA excellent for an identical creek diversion scheme. She'd left town just ahead of the federal prosecutors and set up shop right here in Austin, looking for new victims. In the meantime, Maggie was spreading rumors about my intellectual health and violent dispositions. She employed a private investigator to dig up dust on my military carrier and organized a petition demanding the city condemn my property as a public nuisance. We have children gambling in those neighborhoods, she informed the neighborhood paper. We cannot have unstable people threatening our protection. However, whilst she became busy gambling the victim, I used to be building alliances. I linked with other HOA sufferers through online forums and found a sample. Maggie's HOA had absorbed 6 smaller homes through similar processes during the last 3 years. Each time, the tale turned into the identical. Strain, harassment, bureaucratic warfare, and mysterious zoning changes that always seemed to benefit Rick's production agency. I partnered with my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, whose own family lawn had withered because of the creek diversion. I met Miguel Santos, whose own family farm had been rezoned out of life by Rick Thornwell 2 years earlier. Those weren't isolated incidents, Fernandes. They were a part of a scientific land grasp that had been taking place for years. The vibration of heavy machinery through my farmhouse floorboards had become a day-by-day reminder of what I was combating for. Each night, I documented the water robbery that turned into slowly killing Pop's Dam. However, I was additionally making ready. I set up water waft meters on the dam outlet and creek diversion factors. I calculated the precise quantity of water being stolen, 1,200 gall consistent with day, for $47,000 yearly in agricultural water rights. The gritty texture of sand among my hands as I examined creekbed sediment instructed the tale better than any attorney could. This wasn't just robbery. It was environmental destruction on a massive scale. And then I were given the licensed letter. The metropolis turned into planning to capture my assets via eminent domain for public safety. The listening turned into scheduled in just 2 weeks. Maggie's quote inside the paper made her method crystal clean. Every so often you need to shield the community from itself. However, as I stood at my bedroom window that night watching hurricane clouds acquire on the horizon, I found out something vital. The ones weren't just rain clouds constructing up. They were opportunity. Maggie went nuclear. Rick fast-tracked an eminent domain hearing scheduled for just 2 weeks out. And abruptly, the HOA changed into supplying me $180 for belongings assessed at $890,000. The message turned into clean. Take the lowball provider, lose the whole lot. The local newspaper ran a hit piece that made me sound like a few form of domestic terrorist. Stricken veteran blocks community development become the headline, complete with a image that one way or the other made my farmhouse appear like a crack den and me appear like I hadn't slept in weeks. But Maggie's master stroke turned into the photograph hobby. She staged it perfectly. 20 worried moms keeping youngsters near my property line with a professional photographer capturing their concerned faces whilst my farmhouse loomed menacingly inside the history the FB put up went viral with the hashtag #ProtectOurKids. Our kids deserve safe neighborhoods, she told the Channel 7 News crew. No longer anything problems he introduced again from struggle. You realize what? She become right about one element. I did deliver something returned from conflict. I brought lower back the capacity to recognize while someone's looking to steamroll you with propaganda and the engineering abilities to do something positive about it. Tony Riggs known as with records that modified the whole lot. The EPA had already opened a federal investigation into Willow Creek diversions based totally on my initial complaint. However, here's the kicker. Maggie's preceding HOA in Houston faced that $2.03 million best for the precise equal scheme. Federal environmental crimes follow people even if they pass to new jurisdictions. While Maggie changed into playing the sufferer on social media, I was discovering that her entire monetary house of cards changed into constructed on fraud. The HOA construction loans were tied to inflated property values, and the banks had required guaranteed water access for loan approval. Frugal. If those water rights reverted again to me, their rightful owner, the entire improvement could emerge as financially underwater. The taste of sour irony wasn't lost on me, that they had stolen my water to make their land valuable, and now their personal greed became going to drown them. Maggie's panic was starting to reveal. She supplied me 400,000 coins. No questions requested. 48-hour closing date. Once I refused, she flew to California to method my sister Sarah with a few sobtail approximately her brother's mental health problems. That backfired spectacularly. Sarah won't understand Texas land law, however, she is aware of her brother. She known as me guffawing. Jake, a few loopy lady in tennis clothes, simply provided to assist with my veteran brother. I advised her if she contacts our family once more, I'm calling the FBI. But whilst Maggie become busy making enemies, I used to be making allies. I partnered with environmental attorney Amanda Pass, who specialized in seasoned Bona water rights cases. Together, we fashioned a coalition with downstream farmers who'd been tormented by the creek diversion. Miguel Santos brought historic documentation showing his own family had used creek water for farming, considering 1887. Mrs. Chen supplied pics of her grandfather's garden from the 1940s, fed with the aid of the same creek that changed to now feeding Maggie's ornamental water functions. The nearby Audubon Society turned into mainly interested to research that the creek diversion had destroyed critical nesting habitat for several covered chook species. Seems killing protected flora and fauna while committing water robbery has a tendency to get federal attention real fast. Throughout my nighttime reconnaissance, antique behavior from the military, I found something lovely. Pop's Dam wasn't only an easy earthwork shape. The unique 1978 layout included an emergency spillway machine with hydraulic gates that hadn't been opened in view that 1982. The whole echo of water flowing via those underground spillway channels during my midnight test told me the whole lot I had to know. The mechanism was nevertheless purposeful, and it was designed for precisely this situation, managed flooding to restore herbal water glide styles. I calculated the water quantity needed to restore Willow Creek to its original path. 8 million gallons. The dam was currently maintaining 3. 1 million gallons thanks to current rainfall. The math changed into ideal, but the timing needed to be specific. The use of my drone for aerial reconnaissance, I mapped the precise locations of those new home foundations relative to the authentic creek mattress. 5 houses had been constructed directly in the historic flood channel. 3 greater had basements beneath the seasonal high water mark. Here's the lovely element. The construction crews had installed ornamental creek beds using concrete and decorative stones. They were guarded pretty, however they weren't designed to deal with actual water flow. Meanwhile, my spillway gadget changed into engineered by the military corps in particular for flood control. Then, Maggie made her largest mistake. Her crew commenced putting in everlasting concrete limitations to completely block the authentic creek mattress. This would make my spillway machine vain and permanently ruin the downstream ecosystem. However, it additionally gave me the suitable justification for what I used to be about to do. The weather provider began predicting heavy September rains, perfect seasonal cowl for emergency dam renovation. I stood at those spillway controls at sundown, reading Pop's journal entry approximately assisting neighbors in the course of droughts. The choice crystallized. Time to open the gates. While digging through dusty courthouse facts for the 0.33 time that week, I discovered a misfiled report that changed the entirety. Buried in the back of a stack of 1979 tax tests was the authentic agricultural flood management covenant from Pop Dam creation. The language turned into lovely in its simplicity. Dam operators shall keep herbal seasonal go with the flow styles to hold downstream agricultural water rights in perpetuity. This wasn't just permission to manage flooding. It became a felony obligation that superseded any HOA agreements or metropolis ordinances. However, Amanda Go's research exposed something even more adverse. HOA insurance applications contained flat-out lies. They had claimed no seasonal flooding hazard and permanent creek diversion authorized via all agencies to relax $47 million in coverage. Right here's your 0.03 information nugget. Insurance fraud and development initiatives often contains crook penalties, no longer simply civil ones. When you mislead coverage agencies approximately environmental risks, it's federal mail fraud with mandatory prison time. The deeper we dug, the more the whole scheme unraveled. Rick Thornwell's construction business enterprise wasn't simply the contractor for the HOA development. He became the #1 investor. Every house built on my stolen land positioned cash immediately in his pocket. And here's the kicker. He'd never recused himself from a single city council vote that benefited his task. Pony Riggs shared EPA findings that made my blood boil. The creek diversion had killed the whole population of Guadalupe Base. Included species that had thrived in Willow Creek for generations. Texas Parks and Natural World had documented the fish kill, but some way the file were given misplaced in Rick's office before it can cause federal prosecution. They weren't just stealing land and water, they have been destroying an entire ecosystem. However, the real smoking gun came from Amanda's banking contacts. The construction loans have been secured by fraudulent environmental assessments that claim the creek diversion turned into a transient construction measure. Banks had been advised the water could be returned to its herbal flow once creation changed into complete. If those water rights reverted to me, the complete development would violate federal lending rules. The banks ought to call for instant full compensation of $12 million in production loans. It truly is while I found Pop's handwritten journals inside the farmhouse attic. His 1980 entry broke my heart. Open spillway nowadays helped the Santos farm and 3 others get through dry spell. That's what neighbors do. The dam become by no means about our own family's profit. It turned into approximately community provider, assisting downstream pals continue to exist droughts and coping with floods to guard all and sundry inside the watershed. Analyzing the one's journals, I realized what Maggie had without a doubt stolen. It wasn't simply land or water. It'd become 45 years of community cooperation that my grandfather had constructed one neighbor at a time. My engineering analysis confirmed what I'd suspected. Maggie's creek diversion changed into developing an upstream flooding risk. At some stage in heavy rains, the redirected water might again up into residential regions. The original creek bed had provided herbal flood manipulate for the whole watershed, and my spillway machine was the only way to soundly manipulate seasonal flooding. The timeline strain was crushing. September rains have been anticipated to be the heaviest in 7 years. If I waited for the prison gadget to grind via appeals and federal investigations, herbal flooding would occur anyway, probably causing real property harm. However, if I acted now, I should control the timing and depth. A controlled spillway release would reveal natural flood patterns without endangering each person, even as proving that the HOA improvement violated federal environmental regulation. Status at the spillway controls at sunset, maintaining Pops' magazine. The ethical clarity hit me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't approximately revenge anymore. It'd become about restoring the natural order that had sustained this community for generations. Maggie had systematically destroyed the nearby farming community. Miguel Santos lost his circle of relatives' century antique farm. Mrs. Chen's ancestral garden withered without creek water. The 3 other households have been forced to promote generational properties to Rick's eminent area schemes. But the federal environmental investigators were scheduled to go to next month. Perfect timing. If I ought to demonstrate herbal flood patterns before their inspection, it'd show the HOA improvement violated multiple federal legal guidelines. The musty odor of antique hydraulic fluid and the dam-managed mechanisms jogged my memory that this system became constructed to closing. Pops had designed it for exactly this second while someone could want to arise for the creek and the network that relied on it. 2. As hurricane clouds accrued at the horizon, I made the choice that might change the entirety. Time to honor Pop's legacy and open those gates. You do not simply open a dam without a plan. This wasn't revenge. It became a Navy operation with criminal cowl, environmental justification, and network assist. First, I assembled my team. Amanda Go coordinated the prison strategy, filing extra federal lawsuits to ensure maximum media interest when the spillway opened. Tony Riggs provided federal cover, guaranteeing that EPA investigators might witness what he known as our herbal flooding demonstration. Miguel Santos documented 40 years of downstream agricultural damage, providing historical testimony about seasonal flooding styles that proved the creek diversion changed into destroying generational farming. Mrs. Chen presented her assets as a staging location and brought credibility as the network's most reputable longtime resident. Amanda's criminal approach became brilliant. She filed an emergency agricultural water rights restoration movement, arguing that the dam covenant legally required me to hold seasonal flooding for downstream agriculture. We weren't breaking the regulation. We have been following it. Here is a crucial knowledge nugget. Agricultural water rights regularly supersede residential development rights, in particular if you have historic documentation proving previous use. The secret is having ironclad paperwork that predates any improvement claims. My technical education turned into Natural Army Corps engineering. I created unique spillway operation plans with precise calculations, managed release beginning at 6:00 a.m. Sluggish increase over 4 hours, peak flow at 10:00 p.m. The water extent became calculated to demonstrate herbal flooding styles without inflicting structural harm to anything except Maggie's illegal concrete barriers. Protection turned into paramount. I published warning symptoms 24 hours earlier and in my view notified the volunteer hearth branch. This wasn't a few reckless flood. It was a cautiously managed demonstration of the way water naturally wanted to go with the flow. Amanda contacted environmental reporters from the Austin American-Statesman and local TV stations. Miguel arranged for community contributors to witness the rural water healing. The strategy turned into easy. Control the narrative earlier than Maggie should spin it as risky veteran terrorizes neighborhood. Our intelligence community become instantly out of a spy novel. Mrs. Chen monitored HOA interest through the neighborhood gossip network. In no way underestimate little antique girls with time on their palms. The nearby diner waitress, who came about to be Miguel's cousin, pronounced on town council closed-door meetings. My Navy pal at Fortress Hood furnished surveillance drone aid for criminal documentation. Even as I was rebuilding spillway controls with modern-day hydraulic structures, Amanda became waging financial conflict. She contacted insurance organizations with proof of fraudulent programs, organized for banking regulators to check creation mortgage documentation, and organized whistleblower lawsuits about Rick's conflicts of hobby. The beauty became inside, the timing coordination. Climate Carrier showed heavy rains in 72 hours. Amanda scheduled federal environmental inspection for the same week. Miguel arranged for the rural extension agent to record downstream blessings, a super hurricane of herbal weather, federal oversight, and network aid, all converging at exactly the right second. However, I knew Maggie's psychology. She always escalated while forced, so I prepared for her predictable responses. Emergency HOA assembly, media smear campaign, probably a restraining order filed through her corrupt aside buddy. Amanda drafted preemptive prison responses to each expected attack. The proof protection became critical. I compiled comprehensive image documentation of the current creek diversion, recorded video testimony from affected farmers and neighbors, and collected ancient photographs showing authentic creek mattress and seasonal flooding styles. Amanda secured everything in federal courtroom filings for prison safety. Safety protocols blanketed coordination with the volunteer hearth branch, communique with downstream citizens, and particular notices posted in English and Spanish. I even created an evacuation plan we wouldn't need just to illustrate accountable management. The monetary war changed into Amanda's strong point. She tipped off nation banking regulators about production mortgage irregularities, contacted the Texas lawyer fashionable about insurance fraud proof, and organized a civil RICO lawsuit alleging a sample of racketeering. Right here's every other knowledge nugget. Coordinated regulatory pressure often forces settlement quicker than man or woman proceedings. When more than one companies check out concurrently, defendants cannot combat on all fronts. The scent of WD-40 and device oil crammed the nighttime air as I serviced all rattling system and examined spillway gates beneath minimal go with the flow. The whole lot worked perfectly. Pops had built this gadget to closing. I stocked the farmhouse with resources for a capability siege. Understanding Maggie would strive the whole lot to forestall me. Amanda filed shielding court docket orders preventing interference with lawful dam operations. We set up at Ease Communications using military-grade encrypted radio. As I stood at the one's controls for the very last gadget test, looking typhoon clouds build on the horizon, the whole thing felt aligned. Weather forecast confirmed heavy rains in 48 hours. The federal investigators could arrive in 36 hours. Maggie was scheduled for her morning show appearance in 24 hours, probable making plans another assault on my person. The timing turned into ideal. Sunrise tomorrow would bring justice, and 45 years of stolen water returned to where it belonged. Maggie's desperation reached new tiers when she employed non-public security to patrol my belongings' perimeter. These weren't simply rental law enforcement officials with flashlights. These were the identical tactical gear wannabes who paintings personal army contracts and suppose HOA disputes are fight area. Yeah, my path cameras stuck them red surpassed seeking to sabotage the spillway, manage mechanisms at 2 a.m. Genius was caught on video trying to jam concrete mix into the hydraulic lines, whilst his pal served as lookout. Tony Riggs had tipped off the sheriff's department and Deputy Rodriguez changed into waiting within the shadows once they made their flow. The arrest changed into stunning. Mr. Tactical Vest claimed they were protective network infrastructure from an unstable man or woman. However, it is difficult to provide an explanation for why you're sporting a bag of quickset concrete at 2 in the morning. Maggie's media blitz turned into even greater determined. She appeared at the Austin Morning Show, carrying her Sunday excellence and speaking in that trembling voice politicians use once they need to appear like victims. Veterans want intellectual fitness help, not guns, she told the host, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. So, this guy found out to apply water as a weapon in Afghanistan, and now he's threatening to clean away children's homes. Rick provided expert testimony as a metropolis engineer, approximately catastrophic dam failure risks, effectively forgetting to say that my dam had surpassed every safety inspection for 45 years. However, while Maggie turned into gambling victim on television, my surveillance education was paying dividends. I documented each sabotage strive, each illegal entry, every piece of proof that could later show crook conspiracy. Tony discovered that federal investigators had been wiretapping Rick's workplace phone as a part of an ongoing corruption probe. Those people were greater desperate than I might found out. The criminal attack got here subsequent. Rick rapid-tracked an emergency restraining order hearing for 6 a.m. the subsequent morning, simply hoping to catch us off guard. Choose Henry Walsh, Rick's golf pal, who'd acquired $15,000 in marketing campaign contributions from Rick's creation employer, agreed to pay attention the emergency public protection movement. Amanda observed the corruption connection and right away filed for Walsh's recusal, but we knew the restore became in. In the event that they could not prevent the spillway commencing legally, they'd stop it through a corrupt decide. In the meantime, Maggie prepared a community protection patrol to bodily surround my belongings. 20 HOA residents showed up with folding chairs, coolers, and protect our youngsters signs, making plans to stay circulation, the spillway beginning as environmental terrorism. Wake. The optics had been ideal for her narrative. Suburban families with kids versus dangerous veteran with a dam. But Miguel Santos had been busy too. He introduced 30 farmers and families to guide what we referred to as agricultural water recuperation. Mrs. Chan prepared a counter-demonstration with historical photos showing the creek and its herbal kingdom. Veteran assaults households as opposed to community protects water rights. The technical sabotage escalated when protection footage discovered a person had poured concrete blend into the spillway channel in a single day, growing a blockage designed to motive real flooding risk if I opened the gates. This wasn't simply harassment. It was attempted murder disguised as vandalism. I labored through the night with a transportable jackhammer, clearing the sabotage whilst documenting every chew of concrete as proof. The steel flavor of exhaustion mixed with fury as I realized how a ways they had been inclined to go. Rick used his Metropolis Council emergency powers to declare my assets in drawing close public hazard, authorizing the Hearth Department to secure the dangerous, damn shape we fray. Fireplace leader Martinez, one of the few sincere officials left on the town, privately warned me that this was basically political. Jake, you've got perhaps 6 hours earlier than they pressure me to interfere. He stated, make it remember. The coverage investigation leap forward got here at the correct second. Amanda's fraud reports induced a kingdom investigation, and the Texas insurance fee iced up all HOA improvement insurance policies. Without valid insurance, the construction enterprise faced instant paintings stoppage. Monetary pressure turned into eventually hitting wherein it hurt, Maggie and Rick's wallets. Tony moved the EPA inspection up 24 hours because of credible sabotage reports. Federal marketers were now in direction, arriving at 8:00 a.m. If the spillway opened during their inspection, it would emerge as federal evidence of right water management. But Maggie's final gambit became the cruelest. She contacted Veterans Mental Health Services, claiming I might made suicide threats and needed an involuntary psychiatric preserve. The VA social worker arrived at my farmhouse at 5:30 a.m., simply as I used to be making ready for the spillway operation. I had to convince her I was mentally ready while concurrently preparing to flood a subdivision. Not exactly a normal Tuesday morning communication. Sarah called from California, her voice breaking. I cannot lose my brother, too. Please, Jake. This isn't always what Pops could want. For a second, I nearly cracked. Then I discovered Pops' very last journal access approximately status as much as bullies. My clear-up hardened like concrete. Every now and then you need to flood the valley to save the creek. At 7:02 a.m., though, with federal retailers watching and the morning solar portray the sky orange, I opened the spillway gates to 25% potential. The sound was surprising, no longer the violent rush of destruction. However, the gentle whisper of water returning home. For the primary time in 18 months, Willow Creek began flowing in its unique mattress, exactly where in nature intended. Miguel Santos knelt beside the restored creek and cupped the clear water in his weathered palms, tears streaming down his face. That is the water that fed my grandfather's farm for 60 years, he whispered. Maggie's reaction turned into immediately and predictable. She screamed at the federal agents to arrest the terrorist, her cautiously composed morning display demeanor cracking like reasonably priced paint. EPA agent Sarah Kim evenly defined. Ma'am, this gentleman has the legal right to perform his agricultural flood manipulate device. But Maggie turned into live streaming on Facebook, her voice rising to close to her ear. He's flooding our youngsters' houses. That is what occurs while we let volatile veterans have guns. Except the water wasn't flooding whatever. It was flowing exactly where it belonged in the unique creek bed that her improvement had illegally blocked. Neighborhood news helicopters rotated overhead, broadcasting the spillway operation stay. The Austin American-Statesman reporter began interviewing downstream farmers about their restored water get right of entry to while Maggie attempted to hijack the interview. This veteran is using Army education to assault civilians, she shrieked. The reporter, clearly burdened, asked, Ma'am, the water is flowing within the original creek bed. How precisely is this an assault? You could almost pay attention Maggie's narrative collapsing in real time. Rick became frantically calling to Side Walsh, screaming into his cell phone approximately belongings values and marketing campaign contributions. That psycho was destroying tens of millions in assets fee, he yelled, seemingly forgetting that Amanda changed into recording the communication from the courthouse steps. Here is a prison nugget for you. Texas is a one birthday party consent kingdom, which means you only need one individual's permission to report a telephone conversation, and that man or woman may be yourself. The engineering validation changed into beautiful. EPA agent Kim measured the water waft and confirmed it matched ancient seasonal patterns precisely. Tony Riggs documented the whole thing. This is how the creek flowed evidently earlier than the 2022 diversion. Federal companies prioritize herbal water drift over improvement, convenience. And we have been proving that precept in real time. Mrs. Chen's lawn irrigation gadget crammed for the primary time in 18 months. 3 downstream farms pronounced restored water get entry to their inventory ponds. The neighborhood diner owner brought coffee and homemade kolaches to each person, pronouncing, "My daddy farmed right here. This is the way it need to be." Even a number of Maggie's supporters started quietly leaving as they realized no homes have been really flooded. Turns out it is tough to keep righteous indignation while the catastrophe you are protesting is simply water flowing in which water certainly flows. The insurance crumble increased when the development agency obtained a stop and desist order from country investigators. All work stopped at the HOA improvement pending the fraud research. Maggie found her very own owner of a house's coverage is probably voided because of fraudulent water access claims. Economic house of playing cards become collapsing quicker than a damn product of playing cards. Sigh. But Maggie wasn't finished preventing. She referred to as Rick in a panic. "Get your trucks down here and block that spillway." Rick, seemingly having discovered not anything from the arrest of his security team, dispatched 3 concrete vans to by chance spill their masses throughout the creek bed. Federal dealers straight away arrested the truck drivers for interfering with the federal environmental research. Turns out interfering with federal environmental enforcement is a prison. Now not a civil count number. The technical achievement was the whole thing I would calculated. Water flow stabilized at most fulfilling levels for agricultural and environmental needs. No flooding of residential areas. The creek stayed inside its herbal banks, exactly as 45 years of seasonal styles had proven it might. My Navy Corps engineering had been ideal. The political fallout was speedy. Town Councilman Martinez arrived and publicly demanded Rick's instant resignation. "This corruption has made our town a laughingstock," he introduced to the collected media. "You're performed." Federal investigators multiplied their probe to include RICO costs for systematic land fraud. Tony informed me later, "This is the smoking gun we wanted for crook prosecution." But the sweetest moment came while Maggie found out her $2.03 million funding become now worthless without fraudulent water get entry to. She screamed at me across the creek, "You've destroyed the entirety." 35 households. My reaction become calm, measured, and loud enough for every camera to catch. "No, ma'am. I restored everything. Your household should buy water rights legally just like everybody else has to." Maggie stormed off, threatening federal lawsuits that would by no means materialize. As Miguel's extended-own family arrived with homemade tamales and cold beer, and Mrs. Chen brought a traditional Chinese language tea right to bless the restored creek, I found out something essential. This turned into never about revenge. It was about network. The type Pops had constructed one neighbor at a time, one drought at a time, one act of generosity at a time. The media narrative had shifted absolutely. Environmental agencies hailed the spillway operation as a model for surroundings recovery. The authentic veteran floods neighborhood story had become network reclaimed stolen water. Now and again, the truth flows as evidently as water locating its way home. Choose Walsh's court docket at 2 p.m. became packed tighter than a can of sardines. Media crews, farmers, HOA residents, and federal dealers filled each seat with overflow crowds looking via the windows. You can feel the power in the air. This wasn't just a prison listening to. It became a community reckoning. Maggie arrived with a 3-piece suit army, excessive-powered Houston attorneys, expert witnesses, and sufficient legal firepower to take down a small authorities. She traded her tennis outfit for a conservative black get-dressed in pearls, gambling the position of worried network chief defending harmless families. I showed up with Amanda sporting a simple button-down blouse and Pa's old cowboy hat. Once in a while, the exceptional armor is just being comfy for your own skin. The gallery became divided like a wedding gone incorrect. Supporters at the left clutching their guard are children's signs and symptoms, foaming network at the right with weathered hands and decided faces. Maggie's attorney opened with dramatic flair, imparting pics of muddy creation sites and claiming $2.07 million in flood harm from my spillway operation. They wheeled in a psychiatrist who'd never met me, however became happy to diagnose fight revenge fantasies based totally on newspaper clippings. "Your Honor," the lawyer declared, gesturing closer to me like I used to be a conflict criminal. This disturbed veteran is the usage of Army engineering expertise to terrorize innocent households. He has grew to become water right into a weapon of mass destruction. The courtroom buzzed with whispers until Amanda stood for our response. She presented the 1978 Agricultural Flood Management Covenant that legally required seasonal flooding. EPA agent Kim took the stand and testified that my spillway operation had restored natural water drift styles without causing any actual assets harm. Ancient pics proved present-day water tiers matched 60 years of natural seasonal patterns. Here's your final expertise nugget. Felony water rights documentation usually trumps recent development claims, particularly if you have federal environmental organizations backing your role. Then Tony Riggs took the stand as EPA enforcement officer. His testimony turned into devastating. These changing like HOA improvement had violated 3 separate federal environmental legal guidelines, dedicated systematic coverage fraud, and destroyed protected flora and fauna habitat. Judge Wall squirmed in his seat as federal crimes have been exact in his court docket. You may see him calculating whether or not his political loyalty to Rick became really worth capability federal prosecution for obstruction of justice. The breaking factor came while Amanda referred to as Rick as a witness. Beneath oath, he admitted to fast-tacking zoning modifications even as I was deployed remote places and discovered his financial stake inside the construction enterprise. While Amanda played the recorded smartphone communication approximately destroying belongings' values, Rick exploded. "That's a federal setup," he screamed, storming closer to the go-out. We did nothing wrong. His personal words captured on audio proved the conspiracy higher than any prosecutor ought to. However, the actual emotional energy came from network testimony. Miguel Santos defined 3 generations of farming destroyed by the creek diversion. His voice breaking as he pointed out his grandfather's dream's death with the stolen water. Mrs. Chin confirmed images of her own family garden, lush and green earlier than the diversion, brown and withered after. Her quiet dignity spoke louder than any criminal argument. Fireplace Chief Martinez testified that the spillway operation became professionally completed with 0 safety violations. Downstream belongings proprietors confirmed their agricultural water, get admission to, were fully restored. Then Maggie took the stand for what have become her final overall performance. "He got here lower back from war broken, Your Honor," she said, pointing at me with trembling palms. "He is taking revenge on innocent households using psychological war against children." She claimed I'd threatened her safety and defined the spillway operation as environmental terrorism designed to destroy assets' values and traumatize residents. Whilst Amanda called me to testify, the court went silent. I provided pop journals documenting 40 years of network water sharing, defined my military core engineering calculations, and spoke immediately to Judge Walsh. "Your Honor, I did not flood anyone. I restored a creek that turned into stolen from my circle of relatives on this network for 45 years. The mic drop moment came when Amanda offered very last proof, documentation of Maggie's Houston HOA paying $2.03 million in EPA fines for an identical creek diversion scheme. The federal prosecutor stood and announced a crook investigation into interstate water fraud conspiracy. The court docket erupted as the scope of the corruption have become clean. Judge Walsh had no preference. He denied all restraining order requests, dominated that my spillway operation became felony and useful, and ordered the HOA to stop all interference with federal environmental investigations. His warning to Rick became pointed. This court docket will no longer hinder lawful federal environmental enforcement. As federal retailers escorted Rick from the courthouse, even as banking investigators served extra warrants, Maggie found herself surrounded with the aid of reporters, with nowhere to hide. Me to hide. She refused all remark and sped away in her BMW, possibly already calling moving organizations. I emerged to cheering crowds of farmers, environmentalists, and curious cities folks that had witnessed justice flowing as certainly as water finding its way domestic. Amanda introduced the federal RICO research at an impromptu press convention, even as Miguel thanked me on behalf of every affected family. My statement changed into simple. This became by no means about revenge. It became about doing proper by using the land and those who rely upon it. And 6 months later, justice flowed as clearly as the restored creek. Rick Thornwell pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy prices and were given 3 years in federal jail. Maggie faced $8.07 million in civil penalties and filed for financial disaster quicker than water, dashing via an open spillway. The construction company paid $12 million in EPA fines and got banned from all federal agreement paintings. HOA dissolved absolutely, and residents fashioned a brand new community association centered on environmental stewardship instead of suburban tyranny. My assets' value restored to $1. $2 million after the federal environmental designation made it greater treasured than any suburban development could. The $340,000 agreement from the insurance fraud research went to a terrific purpose. I bought Miguel's circle of relatives' farm at tax public sale and lower back it to him debt-free. Environmental recuperation regularly increases belongings' values extra than improvement ever may want to. The network transformation became the actual victory. The restored creek now draws ecourism, kayaking, chook watching, and fishing wherein McMansions were speculated to stand. Mrs. Chin's Lawn have become an indication website for sustainable agriculture, and 3 downstream farms reported their great crop yields in a decade. The nearby diner became unofficial headquarters for the Willow Creek Healing Association, where farmers and environmentalists deliberate the next fight in opposition to company water robbery. The environmental success handed every expectation. Covered Guadalupe populations recovered to pre-diversion ranges within 4 months. The Audubon Society documented 12 chicken species returning to restored wetland habitat. Texas Parks and Flora and Fauna specified the creek as a critical flora and fauna hall, making sure everlasting protection. My spillway operation have become a case study within the Army Corps of Engineers training guide. Once in a while, the high-quality revenge is just doing all of your tasks correctly. Individually, I discovered peace I did not understand I used to be missing. I renovated Pop's farmhouse, the usage of sustainable creation techniques, and Sarah moved lower back from California to assist manage our developing agorism enterprise. Amanda and I. Well, let's simply say preventing environmental crime collectively creates a pretty robust bond. The ripple outcomes unfold across Texas like water locating new channels. Environmental agencies use the Willow Creek model to undertaking unlawful diversions statewide. Federal corporations cite our case in new water rights enforcement guidelines. I have emerged as an unofficial consultant for communities preventing HOA overreach and the telephone jewelry constantly. We installed the Pops Morrison Environmental Scholarship for rural students analyzing water control. Miguel's daughter, Maria, turned into the first recipient, and he's now analyzing environmental engineering at UT Austin. She desires to protect waters throughout Texas from people like Maggie. The yearly Creek Days pageant celebrates healing and network resilience with neighborhood meals, environmental education, and veteran support offerings. We raised cash for a water rights prison protection fund. This has already helped 6 different groups combat, again towards company theft.